Good evening, and welcome to the St. Petersburg by Night podcasting network. Tonight, we present to you our behind-the-scenes special, After Dark.
Good evening and welcome to the St. Pete by Night Twitch channel where we play St. Petersburg by Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition World of Darkness Chronicle set in St. Petersburg, Florida, including Vampire the Masquerade, including Hunter the Reckoning, and including Werewolf the Apocalypse. My name is Kent, also known as Misha Kent on all social media. I am the host of After Dark and the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night. And you are watching After Dark, which is our behind-the-scenes program where we talk to players and storytellers of St. Pete by Night, but we also talk to movers and shakers within the world of darkness. And I'm happy to announce that one of those movers and shakers is joining us here tonight. They are a content creator. They are a star on one of the well-heralded streams of Vampire the Masquerade, and they are a writer for the World of Darkness. Of course, I'm talking about the Tabletop Geek, also known as April, who has been graciously and willing enough to be my guest here on After Dark tonight. You can find them, of course, on all social media at TheTabletopGeek to keep up with what they're doing. But we have so much that we can talk about tonight. But before we get into it, April, say hello and introduce yourself to our wonderful viewers and community.
Well, that was one heck of a introduction, and I appreciate that. Hello, my name is April Brown. I am also known as the Tabletop Geek on pretty much every social media platform. And yeah, just as Kate here was was mentioning, I don't know much more to say about that.
Well, and I feel like there's so many other things I could have said in that introduction. Like, I felt like that was just a small portion of the accolades and titles that I could have thrown your way. But we'll get into as much as we possibly can cover in our first sit down of what might be many, because it seems like you were just getting into more and more cool things as the time progresses. So we'll have to talk about possibly a future sit down and a catch up after this one. But let's start in the beginning, because I'm always interested to hear people's origin stories, to hear how they got into this weird and wild and wonderful world of darkness that we know. But in the very beginning, where and when did your TTRPG journey start? When had you first started hearing about TTRPGs like Dungeons and Dragons? Not even just World of Darkness, just TTRPGs as a whole. When did that journey start for you?
Well, I've heard about them pretty much all throughout, like, my late teens, early 20s, and I never really got a chance to play them. I didn't know what all, like, it implied. I know it's like people sat around and they, rolled dice and they pretended to be people, and that was all I pretty much knew. And then I met my spouse, which our 10-year anniversary is coming up
Oh,
this
wow.
month.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh, but while we were dating, she was the one that was like, "Hey, me and my friends, we play tabletop RPGs. You say you want to be a part of it. Let me introduce you." And so that's how I got into it.
So, what game were you first introduced with? Like, what was your entry point into tabletop RPGs? What system did you first explore?
Actually, it was Pathfinder.
Really? Okay. I often hear Dungeons and Dragons, but Pathfinder is a great parallel to that. So, it's another
Hmm.
great entry point. So, what was your first character like, and what class or build did you go with that character?
Oh, she was fun. It was a little one-shot game that me, my spouse, and a friend of ours uh, made to where it was just me and my spouse playing, and our friend was the DM. And so the both of them helped me build my first character, and I'll never forget her. Her name was Nymphadora, after my at the time favorite Harry Potter character. Uh,
Perfect.
and she was a half elf ra- ranger, I want to say.
Okay.
And I remember my favorite part about her was she had a little pet companion. It was a badger named Honey.
And what can you tell us about that story or that adventure, and what was your character's part in that adventure?
It was a good introduction to how the world is, to where basically you're start off with me as a ranger in the woods with my badger pal, and then all of a sudden see I come across my spouse's character, who, just like any other character my spouse makes, is a smart mouth. And all of a sudden, like, it's kind of like, you run into somebody, and then you run into a situation, either like you find a MacGuffin or something like that, and then you have to go through certain challenges, and all of a sudden you're like, one of my favorite adversaries that my buddy at the time liked to make was spiders. So there was a point we had a big giant spider that we had to fight.
That sounds like a fantastic but very also smooth introduction, because I've seen some
Mhm.
people get thrown into the deep end of like, okay, there's all this lore and it's this complicated, very thoroughly built campaign, which can be extremely overwhelming, especially if
Right.
you've had no previous exposure to it. But it sounded like it was nice and simple, and they really took you in easily into the process of TTRPGs. Now, after your first experience, after your first session, were you immediately hooked, or did it take a little bit of time for you to kind of find a love of this particular hobby? Because it can be an adjustment period for
Mhm.
some, but I've also seen other people just like become obsessed after their first
Right.
session.
With me, it took some time to really get my feet wet, because so did a couple of little campaigns with my spouse and some friends before. Played another D&D. I want to say this was a fourth edition game. This was right before fifth edition came out. With some friends that, of course, I found the biggest challenge of any tabletop RPG adventure is scheduling.
Always. It is the
Always.
BBEG of all TTRPGs is scheduling. Absolutely.
And then played a little bit of a uh, Wheel of Time tabletop game, which my spouse loves those books. I've never read them. Um, but it was a very interesting campaign, and it made me want to be more interested in the book series itself. Uh, and then there was actually a point that we had a couple of friends that wanted to start up a Star Wars campaign.
Okay.
And I am not a Star Wars fan. I don't have
Really?
any.
Okay, that's a whole different can of worms we could get into, but okay, continue, please.
Yeah, it's nothing like I don't think it's bad or anything. I just never could get into it. And so like but I would try and play a diplomatic character. But
Okay.
I was trying to play a diplomatic character who did not know this universe whatsoever.
With very little actual overall knowledge of the setting, but still
Yeah.
trying to be diplomatic. Oh, well, I appreciate that, and I'm actually in awe of that because that is a huge undertaking, especially with people who are obsessed with Star
Yes.
Wars. If you're playing with any of them, you've got to like walk on eggshells to try and make sure you don't set off one of their triggers. Were you
For sure.
really into fantasy or sci-fi at all as a child? Like, was that a big part of your life, or was this sort of the start of a love of that kind of thing?
With me, so I grew up with a dad. I grew up with a very nerdy family. My dad, I remember growing up, him watching Star Wars and watching Star Trek. Uh, the sci-fi, I didn't really get into sci-fi until about my early 20s when I got into Doctor Who. Um,
Fantastic.
yes. Uh, Fantasy when I was probably about 11 or 12. That was when the Harry Potter movies came out, and that's when I got hooked on these on that story and that world. Obviously, I have my issues with J.K. Rowling as an author, uh,
Understandably.
but when I was a kid, these books were my life.
And they were
And
for an entire generation. I mean, I
yeah,
was I was already a little bit older at that point, but I remember the feeding frenzy that was Harry Potter, like driving past bookstores where there are midnight release dates and people
mhm,
lined up. I don't know if I've seen anything to that magnitude since of
yeah,
a absolute just overall obsession for like any kind of printed literature. You've seen video game releases, although that's a thing of the past now, and movie releases.
mhm,
But for books, the absolute obsession with that series is
mhm,
probably the last of an era, to be honest, because the midnight releases, seeing people in costume and people lined up around the block of bookstores just waiting for the book to come out, let alone the movie.
mhm.
So it's totally understandable, and I think that one thing that can be said for Harry Potter is the world building is fantastic. Like,
Oh yeah,
say what you will about the author, but the world building, the ability to call to a certain generation of children to hit that perfect age range, I think it's been unmatched in any other book series, at least that I know of. I'm a little
all right,
older now, so I don't know what's hot and hip with the kids these days, but at that time it was everywhere. It was everything. So that
everywhere.
was really where fantasy grasped you, was Harry Potter.
Oh yeah,
What
that was.
house are you?
I'm a Hufflepuff.
Amazing. Anyway, sorry, you were going to say something.
No, I was gonna say, like, growing up, like, when I was a kid, I loved these books, and now I see some of the issues that people have and all that, but I just remember that world. I wanted to be part of that world to where you could, like, find that hidden passageway, and you went to an entire different world from your normal everyday life, and that was something that was very powerful to me, like a secret society just under your nose, which is probably why I like World of Darkness so
I
much,
was
but
gonna say the parallels also between that Harry Potter setting and the World of Darkness setting. Yes, one's a little darker and edgier and more adult,
mm.
but there's still that secret society, a world beneath the world, pulling back the veil. So that, I guess, brings me to my next question: is when were you first exposed to the World of Darkness? When did you first hear about it? And then what made you interested in getting involved with it and playing it?
So I have heard the term Vampire the Masquerade for a long time. I just had no idea what it was. My spouse told me that she had some friends that had played it in the past, and all I thought about was a bunch of people in black dresses and black masks pretending to be vampires, which truly ain't far off.
Not wrong, not wrong, especially on the LARP scene of the 90s and early aughts. Like, that was it. You were dressed as like a Matrix character, and you were just walking around like a bar or a club or something like that. So not too far off,
Oh
honestly.
yeah. The way I
When
found out
yeah,
about the game itself and, like, the different clans and all that was, at the time, uh, I was really big into, Critical Role, and on the same YouTube channel as Critical Role, they started up, LA by Night. I was
yes.
like, "Oh, it's that game! It's that game that everybody's talking about. Okay, I can watch it." And so I got to watch the tabletop version. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's a secret society underneath everybody's noses. It's in modern day. People have technology. It's not the same thing as like, D&D where you're pretending to be like in the Middle Ages and all that, although there are parts of that in World of Darkness. But I was just like, "Oh, this is so cool." And I was like, "I've gotta get in on this. I've gotta find a game," but I didn't know who could play. But luckily, I was living in Athens, Georgia at the time, and I had a bunch of friends that, there's a little goth community in, Athens, Georgia, because a couple of DJs made a goth night, and actually, you'll know one of these DJs, he goes by DJ Goth Daddy, who's also the lead singer of, Vision Video.
Yes. Oh my goodness. And actually I've heard a lot of great things about Athens, Georgia as a community that
Mhm.
it's almost similar to a Portland or something like that where it's just this weird little wonderful community surrounded by a very conservative, deep south style, area, and it's huge in stand-up comedy but also apparently the goth and creative community, which
Mhm.
is fantastic.
I
So when did you
remember
oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry,
No,
sorry.
go. I'm
I
thrilled here.
remember Patton Oswalt, the comedian, he stopped by, Athens, Georgia once, and he actually did a joke, and you can find it on YouTube, to
Hmm.
where he tells people, he says, "This city is just such a mind blink," and he tells everybody, he's like, "Okay, who here is under the age of 30? Okay, here's the thing. In about 5 years, you have a decision. You either have to leave or you never leave or you stay here
You
for
stay
the
here
rest of your life."
forever.
'Cause it's not the real world, and to be honest, like, I left Athens, because my, spouse got a job offer to where we had to move across state, and looking back on it, I'm like, "Yeah, it really wasn't the real world, it's a fever dream of a place."
No, I've heard that about like Austin, Texas as well, that there's just these places, these little pockets that are
Mhm.
almost this surreal community. And when you leave them, you're like, oh, I didn't learn anything. Like, I didn't know at all what the real world was like. And now I'm out in it, and either you can go back or you don't. It's just this crazy thing. So I love that you're from Athens. I love that you mentioned Patton Oswalt. We're
Mhm.
already clicking on all levels because that's where I'd first heard about it actually. So when did you actually get the opportunity to play your first game, and what was your character like? What clan?
So the goth scene had a little Facebook group, and I figured who better to ask if anybody's played Vampire the Masquerade than the goth group in town. Well, sure enough, so I posted in this Facebook group, "Does anybody play this? I really want to play it." And sure enough, one of my buddies who I knew from the theater scene was like, "Hey, I've actually been talking to a couple of people that want to start up a game. Would you be interested?" I'm like, "Yes." So a few months later down the line, he finally starts it up, and I got spoiled on this game. Because to keep in mind, my buddy who was the storyteller at the time, he was a forever DM, but it was more of his choosing just
Mm-hmm.
because, like, that's how detailed he is with it. Like, he would much prefer to build the world than to have a world for him to be in.
Mm-hmm.
He's also has a master's in theater. He's been doing directing for community theater for some time. He worked for the theater department at UGA. So the man knew how to tell a story and to set a scene. And so I got spoiled on that. And it was a modern day story set in Budapest, Hungary.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And to this day, like if I look at pictures of Budapest at all I think about is like my character sleeping underground, during the day. But I had a I s basically, the way he did it was we didn't choose our clans. He said, "The way you do it is I'm gonna have you roll, because you don't choose your sire chooses you."
Right.
So we had a basic idea of a character. The idea for my character was she was this 30-something D4C from Nashville, Tennessee, who was basically backpacking through Europe trying to find herself after she, planned her entire future around a man who ended up leaving her for a rising star country singer. Um, and that was the basis of the character that I had. And then I rolled and I got Gangrel. I was like, okay,
Okay.
how do I make this a Gangrel? And it actually worked out perfectly. I had it to where I made her a more physical character. She was raised a military brat, and so she was her dad's only daughter. So of course he put her in every like self-defense class he possibly could. So she knew how to handle herself, which
Right.
is why she felt comfortable backpacking through Europe by herself. Um, Her sire basically had one of his buddies who was also a gangrel pick a fight with her, tried to steal her guitar, and ended up, at least like if a human could break a vampire's nose, like she would have. And so he was like,
All
"Yeah,
right.
that would."
Okay. Yeah.
And and so it worked out, and it was definitely a chronicle of horror. I mean, my DM, my storyteller put this character through hell, and I loved every moment of it. And I was so sad when COVID hit and we tried to move towards online, and we just kind of stopped
It
playing.
does
And
what it does. Yeah, that was a
yeah.
really, I mean, it was a great time for TTRPGs because I feel like a lot of people got into them because of the pandemic, but also it was terrible for in-person games. I mean, how did you keep them going? How could you keep them going? And the shift to online is a tough one when you're used to doing the gathering in person. It's a whole different atmosphere.
And
So
it was
you're
also hard for my storyteller, who was just like, yeah, it's hard for me to create a chronicle of horror when we're living in an actual horror story right now.
Yeah, it's a lot scarier out there than it is anything that I could potentially come up with and tell you.
Exactly.
Absolutely. So your knowledge of and love of the world of darkness is still probably 5, maybe 6 years old then. You're still what I would consider to be fairly new to the entire
Mhm.
setting. That's amazing because you've done so much in regards to World of Darkness in that time period. So that's even more incredible and more admirable. I want to go back to something that you'd mentioned, which was theater. I am a theater kid. I have been doing theater since I was 5.
Mhm.
So I totally connect to you. Do you have a theater background? Was that a big part of your coming up and upbringing before getting into TTRPGs and stuff like that?
Yes, I got into theater when I was in my late teens,
Okay.
and I did a little community theater. This was when I was living in a tiny town outside of Athens. So everything that we did was like it was a show once a year, and it was a very country themed show. Uh, Very goofy, very silly. But it was good that I did that because like I was still trying to find my stage legs. Like I was talking like this and and all that. It took me a while to develop that big personality of taking on character. And then, when uh, shortly after my spouse and I got married, I was like, I want to get into theater and I want to start doing some things in Athens. And I and it was great because my first show that I did in Athens was with a little community theater to where it was The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and I played Fenris Ulf, captain of the Witch's Secret Police.
That's amazing.
Yes. This was my early stages of getting into Gangrel.
Right.
And, pretending to be this wolf, having this epic fight scene with, like, this 8-foot wooden axe, literally 8 foot, like, they brought it out of the prop department and it was tall, and we were like, "Oh, we can cut that." And then with the fight choreographer was like, "No, no, no, no. I have an idea."
Yeah. Oh, that's
Uh
so cool. Yeah, I'm sorry, keep going.
So I did that for a little while. I got into theater for a little bit, and then I got out of I got out of theater because I was busy doing local politics, which I don't recommend. I
No.
was at the time, I was the chairwoman of the Libertarian Party of Athens. I'm not a libertarian anymore, but I was the chairwoman, and that left me with literally nothing else, nothing to do. Uh, I couldn't, I couldn't commit to like 2, 3 month rehearsal time during that time. And so that's when I was glad that, my buddy did start up, our Vampire the Masquerade game because it gave me a chance to scratch that theater itch again.
Exactly, and I was gonna say, like, all of the theater skills I had developed over time have come into play through TTRPG journeys, through storytelling, through playing characters. Did you find that that was a huge benefit to you, was having learned all those skills in theater to be able to bring into a TTRPG setting, especially since later on you would go on to stream and record things and, be very visual about it. Did you find those skills beneficial?
Oh, very much so. It helped me to getting in theater helped me get into the mind of a character, how to pretend to be somebody else, and how to, think like how to think like how this particular person would think, how to act like how they would act, different things like that. And so I found that my theater background was very useful for TTRPGs. And then when I would do stuff that was streaming, when I went to I've done a couple of live LARPs, like at the night in question, and I felt like that helped a lot. So yeah, my theater background having a theater background and having a TTRPG background, they kind of help each other.
Oh, absolutely. No, they benefit each other easily. I think a lot of TTRPG is improv. So
Oh yeah.
learning those improv skills through TTRPGs can be very good when you go back to a theater community, taking some of those skills with you. It is very beneficial on all sides, no matter which side you come in through. Those
Mhm.
skills are so useful across the board. How did so you had this first vampire campaign. How did that transition into all of the amazing projects you've done since? Like you were on Are We Dead Yet? How did you find out about the greater vampire community following, the pandemic hitting and this one campaign? When did it start reaching out into all these other opportunities?
During the pandemic, after like it had been some time since me and my first campaign had played, I got uh the call from my spouse saying, I got this job, it's cross state, we gotta move. And so I was like, okay. And it was a great opportunity. It was a great move. But I was left on the other side of the state all by myself without any friends or family in the middle of pandemic. So I did what most people did during the pandemic was I'll download TikTok. And I checked out TikTok and I was making some little crummy little TikToks at the time. And then I later spawned into uh TTRPG TikToks, particularly when it came to D&D, because I did see there was a large D&D community on TikTok. But then I was like, I really miss my game. And so I started reenacting some certain scenes from my campaign. And so I could show my friends back home in Athens. And then I started meeting some other players that way that were making similar, of course, Matthew Webb and of as I was, and all my, all the people that I hang out with online, and we all became friends that way. And then we started making to where it's like, we would all show, like, of course, I only had the one character, but then I would get ideas for like different clans and all that. The way I got to be the tabletop geek on TikTok was I would make videos of various different classes in D&D and D and various different clans in BTM. And so that's why I called myself the Tabletop Geek because it was pretty much only a tabletop channel.
Right. That's so incredible too. And I got the opportunity to watch some of your videos, and they are so creative and so clever. And I think again, corollary to tabletop theater content creation, it's all of the same atmosphere. It's all about character. It's all about presentation and performance. What got you into really wanting to do those videos? Because there's a lot of pressure, a lot of anxiety that comes with recording content, editing content, a
Mhm.
lot of skills that are necessary to make good content. What gave you the courage and the drive to continue to make content? Because I know a lot of people who had a strong start but quickly dropped off because they weren't getting
Mhm.
numbers or they got self-conscious or whatever the case may be. What helped you push through all that to continue to make content?
With me, it was, making friends, through we would, start duetting each other's different videos, and, I would wake up and be like, "Oh my gosh, that's awesome!" And then, and so just, finding this a little pocket of community, and would duet each other's videos, and then one of us, James, also known as Consumer of Coffee and PCs on TikTok, he created this, so I would create these ideas for different characters, like a Ventrue Prince. Didn't have a name yet, but she would just be a Ventrue Prince. Then he got the idea for this Malkavian Oracle, and then all of a sudden he started talking as this Malkavian Oracle. And me and my friends looked at that and we can do that? We can do that. And so we started doing that, and then we were like, "Wait, are we LARPing on TikTok?" And we were like, "Dude, we're LARPing on TikTok."
And that leads into the evolution of what would be Exeter by Night.
Mhm.
And I want to talk about that in just a second. But at first, I want to let everyone know that we are doing a giveaway tonight. I meant to mention this at the top of the show. And this is one of the coolest, most unique, most relevant giveaways we're doing tonight. Burnham, one of our moderators, has been generous enough to donate some stocking caps that he sewed himself. But what makes these even better is that they are salubri themed. They have a secret hidden third eye under the band that you could potentially walk away with one of these caps tonight by putting in the hashtag salubri in the chat. And at the end of the show, we will give away one of these hats and it'll be shipped off to you directly from Burnham himself. I wish I could enter in for one of these because I think this is the coolest thing ever. And as those who've been keeping up with St. Pete by Night know, we've had a little bit of a salubri storyline going on. And so this is more relevant than ever to our wonderful community. So put in hashtag salubri in the chat and you could be in the running to win one of these amazing hats. It is so, so cool, and we're so grateful to Burnham for donating these for our giveaway here tonight. Now, let's talk about Exeter, because Exeter has been this mystery to me. I've never really gotten involved with it. I know it went through an evolution over time and that it had to change, but it was this TikTok based LARPing community. That's how I understood it at first. And a big part of me was like, well, how does that even work? So, if you could do me
Mhm.
the honor of explaining Exeter to me and how it came to be, how you discovered it, how you got involved with it, and how does it work? Because as far as I knew, it was just scenes of these, characters and duets and whatnot. But then it
Mhm.
it spawned into something huge and much bigger since. So take me through the journey that is Exeter, because I'm so fascinated by this.
So basically the way it started is like I said, I had this little Ventrue Prince, and then James had his Malkavian Oracle named Kenneth, who was the prince's uh personal oracle. And from there, we all just me and the friends that I made, we were just kind of interacting. And then we were like, somebody suggested, let's make a Discord. And it was just like five of us, or like five or six of us, that were okay. And it was just going to be like, okay, let's have the Anarchs and the Prince fighting over territory, because that's what the Camarilla and the Anarchs do, and little things like that. And then I woke up one morning and I saw that Matt Webb, uh, or or Matt Stormcrow on TikTok, duetted one of my videos or stitched one of my videos and made with his Sabat character, Pierce Cross. And we were like, oh my gosh. And we got to talking and people were getting into it and they were sending us messages like, hey, can I be a part of this? Can I be a part of this? And so we had to come up with, okay, this is growing more to than just 6 nerds on TikTok goofing around.
Right.
People wanna get in on this. And so, so Matt had the idea of doing, Nordic LARP or negotiation-based LARP, to where basically we would have an entire Discord to where people would go and negotiate scenes of what they wanted to see. And then, when after you negotiated your scene, then you would go on TikTok and record your portion of it. And then the person that you negotiated with could either stitch or duet. Some people could write up scripts to where they would have duets and have like the headphones in to where they would talk, one person talk, the other person talk. Some people would just do stitches, things like that. And I still can't believe to this day how well it worked, but it worked because it was the height of the pandemic. It was like early 2021 when we launched, like March of 2021. So you had a bunch of theater nerds and TTRPG players who have not left the house in almost a year, and you gave them an opportunity to interact with people, dress up in costumes, create characters, and all that, and people jumped on it. And uh, you had it to where it's like with me, I was like filming every single day.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I mean, there was a huge explosion of creativity that came out of this concept. I remember first discovering them on my FYP and then seeing how much deeper and deeper that well went and the amount of production work that people put in. I mean, one of the things I've loved about World of Darkness is it's a collaborative storytelling game. It's not dungeon
Mhm.
crawls. It's very much like working with your fellow players or with your storyteller. And I feel like that era, that Exeter project, that
Mhm.
experiment really showed off that process because it does sound like there's like some script writing, there's some scene designing, but it's people working together. It's not just
Oh yeah.
one person telling you, okay, you got to play this scene now. No, like you're working with one another and designing these outcomes in this whole scene. And so I think that really exemplifies in a social media form what World of Darkness storytelling is like.
Mhm.
Uh, so it started out with just the 6 of you. It exploded into something more. How did it feel being one of the kind of founding members of this project? Like that's such a cool thing to be able to like a feather in your cap of just this little thing you were doing ended up becoming so much bigger and more.
It really hit hard when we were like, okay, will you work on the Discord to where we had it to where it's like negotiation rooms, and then we had it to where like people could post their videos that way you could somewhat keep track of it, although bunch of people uploading every single day. It could still be difficult, but you had like subgenres and all that. And we were like, okay, let's open up live. And we open up live. And that day, I remember working and my phone just going blip, 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 blip. By the end of the day, we had over 200 people join the Discord, and we were in shock. We thought maybe we'll get 10 or 20 people interested in something like this. We did not expect as many people wanting to join this Discord, and then as many people wanting to be actual players,
Yeah,
which was a really neat experience.
that mirrors the St. Pete by Night experiment we've been doing so well because I'd seen Vampire the Masquerade starting to pop up. I'd seen a lot of people say, "Hey, it's on my bucket list of games that I want to play." You know, I've heard about it, never gotten a chance to play it, so I thought, okay, I will run a Vampire the Masquerade game. I'll make it a West Marches style so anybody can play, just so people can get their feet wet and see what happens.
Mhm.
The surprise I got in how many people there were that were genuinely interested, just like your experience. We opened the Discord, we started inviting people, and we had over 200 people join with an interest of getting involved with this. So obviously, the demand is out there. Like,
Oh, for
people
sure.
want to get into this gaming system, and it's so cool to see this as a very old school World of Darkness player myself over 20 plus years, seeing that the game was still relevant, that people
Mhm.
still had an interest in it, and that there was a demand for it was so cool. My next question would be, how did this transition into Are We Dead Yet? And what, explain for people who haven't seen it before, what is it? How did you get involved? But how did this Exeter experiment turn into Are We Dead Yet?
So, Are We Dead Yet is well, it started as a Thin Blood based RPG, Thin Blood based V5 game, uh, ran by Huddy.
Who was a
Huddy, I was
previous guest on the show, so that's fantastic.
Huddy, I've been a huge fan of Huddy's YouTube channel for ages. And then when the Exeter by Night stuff started blowing up, she made a TikTok channel and started following a bunch of us, myself included. And I was over the moon to see like her outstar Jason Carl following me. Like, you gotta be kidding me.
It's huge. It's huge.
And yeah, and then, she said, "Hey, listen, I got this idea for a Thin Blood, chronicle based in, uh, gosh, what is the based in Myrtle Beach, which is where she runs another chronicle with some other friends of hers, some other, BTM YouTubers and all that, um, called Blood on the Grand Strand, and this was basically to be like a little spin-off, of it. It was to be set in the same universe. The characters from the other show would come on to ours and all that, and she was like, "I would love to have you be a part of it." I was like, "Of course I wanna be a part of it." Uh, and because it was cool, she actually, uh it was funny. I was watching Huddy before she told me this idea about a Thin Blood campaign. She did a one-shot game on World of Darkness official channel of the Sabbat game. And when she was describing the prince of that city, I was listening to it. I was like, that prince sounds familiar. It's like, what? Why does that prince sound? I messaged her. I was like, tight, tight bun, uh, Venture. Am I crazy? And she's like, "No, you're not crazy. I was really inspired by what you made on TikTok with Prince Annika with Exeter." And so I thought that was really cool. And then when she told me about the Thin Blood game, I was like, "Sure, I've never played a Thin Blood before. But I've always wanted to try and check it out." And yeah, got to do that. That was really cool.
Well, and that has to be so flattering, and another feather in your cap to be an inspiration for such an influencer as Huddy, that they would incorporate something you've created into one of their own stories. That's got to be so awesome and so cool. And so to get the invitation following after to join a game must have just been absolutely thrilling.
Oh yeah, I was really excited about it, especially because especially the whole idea of it to where she's like, "Okay, you guys are friends. You've been friends forever, but you kind of drifted apart." And so I got to thinking, it's like, okay, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, not too far from my hometown, Athens, which is a college town because we were all supposed to be like around college age. So I had the perfect idea of like having this ultra political, I guess you could say social justice warrior kind of character that went to all the protests and all that, because that's what those were the people I hung out with in Athens, who just recently graduated UGA with a political science degree, and then everybody was like, "Yeah, I went to UGA, went to UGA." It was like, so I was all excited. I was like, "Yes, we're all from Athens. Yes, I'm so happy." um,
That's just, and it's cool too, and that's another benefit to World of Darkness. It's so relatable. It is our
mhm.
world. It's talking about places we've seen or been or can at least go visit if you haven't been there before. It is one of the more grounded, relatable TTRPG experiences I've ever had, and I think that's what really connects with people, is that these are people we know. They're based off people we know. These are places we've been. This is all believable content, which with a D&D or a Star Wars, obviously it's fictional. You can only, imagine so much about it. It's outside of our scope of believable, but World of Darkness is the exact opposite. It is
Mm-hmm.
so believable and so grounded to the point that you can't completely convince me that it isn't based off of a reality in some concept and that there isn't a secret society of vampires out there, because it's possible. Like, something about the way World of Darkness is built makes
Mm-hmm.
it so possible that you can almost see through a lens of World of Darkness in your day-to-day life, in your
Mm-hmm.
experiences. Did you find that phenomenon happening with you to the point that, like, you would go out and you'd be like, yeah, that's probably a vampire club, or yeah, that could be a great spot for a haven? Or did you find that actually that bleed happening into your real life, that you started picturing the world in World of Darkness?
When I first got into it, when I did my first campaign with my friends back in Athens, I used to think about like, what would Athens look like in the World of Darkness? Well, first of all, to me, Athens is an anarch city. You cannot convince me
I
otherwise.
believe that 100%. Yeah. From what
Athens
I've
is
heard, I haven't had the chance to visit, but from what I've heard, absolutely.
Athens is definitely an anarch city, and then I would think about like, I would try to think about like, sewer systems and all that, like, wouldn't like they wouldn't really like I would think about like the Nosferatu. Where would the Nosferatu live? Well, sewer systems in Athens, they're not like, these big cavernous, like what you see in Bloodlines video game.
Right.
I always had this idea that especially since when you read in 5th edition that the more higher generations of Nosferatu get, the more they look kind of more just disfigured people and not like the Nosferatu of which they're known for.
Right.
And so my idea was like they would live in like rundown trailer parks in the middle of the woods. To me, that would make more sense in that setting. They would probably live more out in the boonies or in the sticks to where they could be away from people.
Right, right. And I think that evolution in the storytelling and in the system of the blood's thinning, so the deformities aren't as alien,
Mhm.
aren't as. I think that's so. It's the evolution of the game.
Yeah.
Because Nosferatu, you were a masquerade breach just by existing, and now
Mhm.
not so much. Now again, they're grounding it. They're making it relatable and believable, because I'm sure we've
Mhm.
all at one point or another encountered somebody in our lives that were like, if you told me that was a Nosferatu, I wouldn't be surprised. Like, I could totally believe that. And I think that that's cool, that that's the direction that the game is headed in, and that they have still tried to make reality a really important part of the building of it.
Mhm. That and also, like, you see, like, some of the there have been plenty of buildings, like, even here, I live in, Columbus, Georgia now, to where I look around and I'll be like, "You know what? If you were to tell me that's an Elysium, I'd believe you."
Absolutely. No, I found that when I moved to Florida and into St. Pete, which is why that's become the game that I run. Is I just saw so many places that I was like, this is such a vampire city, and it's a
Mhm.
Toreador city, no less, because of the art and all this, and that's what ended up being the inspiration for the game. But yeah, you can see it. I think once your eyes are open, once the veil is lifted, you see beyond the masquerade, you can picture it in your world. You
Mhm.
can picture it in your day-to-day life and in your settings, and I think that's so cool.
St. Petersburg by Night is brought to you through collaborations with our partnered vendors: Wolfpack Dice, Ember Fox Dice, Dragon Ink Dice, Bear the Bard, Champs Tramps, Panchi Artista, and Chromatic Creations US. Links to our partnered vendors, as well as our Twitch and YouTube channels, can be found on our website, stpetebynight.com. The official theme song for St. Petersburg by Night is Vampire by Faith and Failure. You can find them at faithandfailure.com. You can follow SPBN on all socials with the hashtag StPeteByNight. If you wish to support our program, you can do so at ko-fi.com/StPeteByNight to help keep the stories rolling.
you, in your 6 year, 5, 6 year journey of Vampire the Masquerade, of World of Darkness, have accomplished so much. But more than anything else, I think you have accomplished the dream of so many World of Darkness players in the fact that you got the opportunity to become a writer for the official World of Darkness. So I'm going to change the screen here to show you off. April is a writer on the Bloodstained Love supplement that was released earlier this year. And if you can see on the credits there, I've circled in a little red box the name April Brown because our fantastic, wonderful, amazing guest here was one of the contributing writers to this book. So let's talk about that.
Okay.
How? That's the first exploding question out of my brain. How did this happen? And what were you feeling when this became a reality? But yeah, how did you even get selected, picked to become a writer? Because that's like getting picked to star in a movie in my mind.
Yeah.
Having read so much material from them over 3 decades, how did you get to join that elite class of people and get involved in this?
Well, the way I did it was, it was honestly sh sheer dumb luck, I think. So, I went, I believe it was 2022, 23, I believe, is when, I went to no, 22. 2022, I went to, my first and so far only, uh excuse me, my first ever night in question out in Austin, Texas. It's ran by my buddies Matt Webb, Matt Stormcrow, and my buddy Jonathan, also known as Noxaturnus on TikTok. Their company Jackalope. This huge blockbuster style one night one shot of a Sabat game which is set in in the 90s during a illegal rave, and it's basically a giant shovel party. Um, but when you're playing as a human, you don't know that until like you get bonked over the head and thrown into a grave. Well, while I was there, I met Outstar. She was the player guest of honor, and she and I had followed each other for a while on social media, so we got to talking. And her character interacted with my character. I played a very naive, very sweet little Catholic 17-year-old who just graduated high school and was off to college and just wanted one night of freedom, one night of rebellion. And here comes Outstar's character who plays like this rave scene queen who's like, "Here, you want some drugs?" And, so we kinda got to hang out, from that and, followed each other on social media and all that. Well, then, a gentleman by the name of Juana, I believe is how you pronounce it, he was working on this project, and he's, posted on social media like, "Hey, I've heard that people play, like, Vampire the Masquerade on TikTok, and I was wondering if anybody knows anything about like romantic styles because I got this idea for a book." Well, Outstar tagged me and said April's plays BTM on TikTok and she does romantic plot lines because my big Shiloh and Reggie was a big one back then. So she was like, introduce each other. And so I got to talk to him, and he was telling me, like, yeah, I've got this idea for a book to where it basically teaches people how to play romantic characters or play romantic plot lines in various aspects of RPGs. So whether it's tabletop, LARP, or anything like that. And I found out that there's this subgenre of players on TikTok, and I have no idea what it's about, and I would like to learn more about it. And so I showed him some of the work that I did, and he said, "This is fantastic." And he was like, "Do you know anybody who can write this?" And I was like, I could write something.
Also
and,
me?
and he was like, sure. So yeah, basically talked to him. He gave me an idea. I was in contact with him and his team, and I was like, okay, so what do you want me to write? He was like, just basically tell me how you would create a scene, how you would create emotion and all that. And I would just describe like some of the benefits, like one of the biggest benefits of playing romance on TikTok versus like RPG or tabletop or LARP is that you don't have that awkwardness of being in person.
There's a
Um,
separation. Yes,
yes.
absolutely.
So there's some of that separation, and you can do some things like, lean your head towards the camera on one side, and the other person, when they do it, they lean on, and it looks like you're kissing and all that. And so you can kind of fudge some things around, especially like uh, you can have a romantic heartbreaking moment, of which I did a lot with Shiloh, of like the blood tears of the fake blood running down your cheeks. You can have emotional music set, which I made several people cry numerous times from what they told me. And so it was those things to where basically I was I gave step by step instructions on how you would uh, provoke such emotional scenes within a TikTok if that was something you wanted to do.
So, for those who have this book, which sections, if they wanted to find out which parts were written specifically by you, is there a particular section of the book or certain passages that they could look out to find your specific writing?
Yes, there is an entire section that talks about TikTok. And it talks about a couple of different things, but it's mostly like it mentions TikTok, how to play like it basically talks about the different avenues to where you could play romance. So TikTok, that's my entire section. After that, then it talks about like if you wanted to exchange like love letters between two characters and how that would be and to me that's a very fascinating
Oh, it's
thing
fantastic.
to think about, especially when you think about like the Pony Express with the Camarilla and all that. Uh, so different. So, but whenever that entire section that just talks about TikTok, that is all me, and I'm just so proud of it.
And you should be. I mean, what an incredible accomplishment. And I've had the pleasure of reading the book, and it is so incredible. And I'm so glad to see that passage mentioned because, as a group that started on TikTok, moved to Discord, plays solely online, it felt like it was speaking to us. And so we got a little bit of a little bit of joy out of seeing that and to see that community or that gameplay style represented in these modern books, in these more current books, is fantastic because it makes us feel like we must be doing something right. And it's just so good to see that representation. So, full disclosure, when I first heard about this book coming out, I had a guttural reaction of dread and fear because romance has always been a polarizing and controversial topic when it comes to TTRPGs. There's people who take it too far, there's people who take advantage of it. I've seen it, be distressing in relationships, and cause problems in real life relationships or lead to real life relationships. So, especially in our community, it was something that we were really apprehensive about. But I was
Mhm.
surprised and pleased by this book because I do think romance is a wonderful storytelling tool. I think, there's books that have been based on romance, an entire subgenre of books that are all based about romance. Your A Crown of Thorn and Roses, your,
Mhm.
Fabio based books from back in the day.
Mhm.
There's movies, your romantic comedies, romantic dramas. Romance is an important thing, and I think to try and remove it from gaming does a disservice to storytelling and does. So I was really pleased once this book did come out and I got to see it, how it expressed ways to do so in a healthy and safe manner. And so I was glad to see my fears and apprehensions turned over on its ear about this book because at first I was like, "Oh no." Like, I remember a time when it was a very toxic game to play. Vampire the Masquerade
Mhm.
brought out all the monsters of real life into an environment where they would take advantage of. So to see that evolution in the writing, in the material, is so Fantastic. So, first and foremost, thank you for being a part of a project to help teach people the right way to do that. Did you or did the team ever have any worries or apprehension about getting into this material? Was there any talks about, like, hey, we have to be very careful about what we write down, or was there any talk about that kind of former era of TTRPGs and some of the things that are still remnant to today?
Not
That's a
so
big question, I know, but
not so much like any like warnings. With me, like it was more of uh, I would I would type something, but then I would have to remember that maybe not everybody that was reading this knew how TikTok work, and so
right,
like they
that's
would have
true.
to remind me, like, "Hey, can you put like the mechanics of how this works on TikTok?" Um, but yeah, I totally know what you're talking about because when the early days of Exeter by Night, especially when we introduced the Shiloh and Reggie plotline, which were basically the Romeo and Juliet of Exeter. You had this anarch neonate who was in love with his former touchstone, now completely brainwashed by the Sabbat Toreador fledgling. Uh, but a lot of people, like it was weird because I never got any of the hate, but Brad Hardwick, who plays Reggie in Exeter, he was getting messages from people that were just not nice, like just saying, "Hey, get this romantic crap out of my VTM game." Like, what are you talking? It's like, what vampire genre do you know that doesn't have some sort of romantic plot line
Right.
and
Even
to
Bram
it?
Stoker's Dracula, I mean, all
Right.
it goes back to the origins of vampires.
And one thing that we always did was with Reggie and Shiloh is that the poor things, like you rooted for them, but at the same time, like you would look at them like this ain't a healthy relationship, and and we would have to explain to us because some people is like, oh, this ain't healthy. It's like, no, they're vampires.
It's not
I mean,
supposed to be.
no, it's like they're I mean, they still feel some echoes of love from their human life, but mostly it's just that need of companionship. It's that obsession and possession that the beast has. So not to say that Twilight was ever a good example of a healthy relationship, but it's not that, lovey-dovey healthy relationship. They're going to be a toxic couple that you root for and hope that one day that they will see how toxic they are, and they just don't.
Another perfect example of this in media is Beauty and the Beast. A lot of people herald that as this perfect love story, but if you actually look at it now, especially with the 21st century look, like go back and watch,
Mhm,
that was a pretty toxic relationship, but it did exemplify the concept of this monstrous creature trying
mhm,
to have a relationship, and how that really does kind of transition over to vampire, which the concept is the same. It's just a wolf in sheep's clothing type
mhm,
situation. And I do think that's very powerful, and it is very organic
mhm.
to the vampire storytelling experience and the setting, because vampires are very much about lust and love and predatory behavior. In your games, either ones that you've played in the past or now, how important were safety tools? Did you take that into account? And what are some maybe tips or suggestions you can give to people for playing romance and how to do so safely?
Oh yeah, safety tools was always like when Brad and I first were talking about that we were going to bring in these characters and then make them to where they had like crushes on each other and make it a whole romance plotline. There were some things that we discussed as far as uh what we were okay with and what we weren't okay with. It's like with Huddy's game, Are We Dead Yet? I love it. She gives us an entire checklist of like things that are you okay with, are you not okay with? Because they're with Vampire the Masquerade, like the great thing about fantasy and tabletop and role playing and all that is that you can explore darker themes, but you do it on your own terms. And you don't force somebody to be uncomfortable with something just because, oh, it's the world of darkness. It's badass and you know an F you if you can't handle it. Uh, is it's like skydiving with a parachute. You've got
Right.
to have that comfort, or you've got to have that protection. So I always found it very useful. I never saw when I was doing Night in Question, which again is a heavy setting.
It's
That's where
Sabat. I mean,
yeah,
yeah,
that's you're getting straight up murdered, buried alive, and then you become this evil killing machine that just wants to cause destruction. Uh, but it's the same thing. We had those safety tools. You had when you go to something like the Night in Question, you have to go to a safety training that lasts for like a couple hours. You don't go to it, you don't play.
right.
And and even though, like, we had check-in systems like, "Hey, are you okay? Are you not okay?" or anything like that, we would stop a negotiation. Uh, People would always ask, like, "Doesn't that break the flow of the game?" I'm like, "No. You stop, you negotiate, and then you move on." And to me, that never stopped the flow of the game. To me, it just made things better.
Well, and as an old school gamer, I'm shocked that it took me as long as it did to encounter my first consent sheet, my first, safety tools of that manner. I didn't experience anything like that until easily 2021.
Mhm,
But the fact that that is the norm now is so wonderful. It does make
mhm,
gaming a much more safe experience. I feel like it does prevent a lot of the issues that we've seen in previous generations of gamers and previous experiences. And I think I love that this book that you were a part of talked a lot about that. They did
mhm.
make that a priority because I think everybody knows, you know, this can get deep. This can get dangerous. And the role playing experience, just like the theater experience, there's a certain relation and like we talked about it being a benefit before about how grounded World of Darkness is, about how realistic real World of Darkness is. That's also a negative as well because with your fantasy RPGs, we're not elves. There aren't
Right,
dragons, that we
right.
know of. There isn't that kind of level of magic and everything like that. That's still a foreign concept, so it allows you to have a certain level of detachment. But with World of Darkness, that detachment is razor thin, like it is very, very small. And so the opportunities for bleed, the opportunities for crossover, the opportunities of getting too into character are
Mhm.
that much more of a risk. And so I'm glad to see that you practice and preach it, that this book practices and preaches safety tools, and that these conversations are happening because they didn't for a very, very, very long time. It was not normal. People just threw themselves into these situations and, with very strong consequences coming out the other side. As someone who is married, has a partner, how does romance in TTRPGs, how do you keep a healthy, happy relationship while also engaging in romance and TTRPGs, especially if it's with people who aren't your partner? Do you have any
Mhm.
suggestions for people with that? Because I've seen it done well, and I've seen it more commonly go very, very poorly.
Yeah.
And would you have any advice on that, or can you give any like experiences in your own personal experience that you could relate to people?
So one of the things I did, so this was back when I was first doing like Exeter and all that. My spouse and I were monogamous. We're now polyamorous now, but my play partner Brad, still monogamous and all that. So wanted to make sure. Uh, my big thing is like with me and my spouse's relationship, we're very secure people. So when it comes to our relationship. But we're also constantly talking. I'm not hiding anything. I'm showing like, look at this, look at this. And what was funny is that like she would see the romance stuff and she'd be like, eh. But she thought was cool that a Sabbat priest was brainwashing a little Toreador fledgling with no like supernatural powers, just sheer indoctrination. She thought that was the coolest part of that story. Uh, but it was one of those things to where it's like, okay, so especially for somebody who was two people who were playing a romantic couple who were both in relationships, my biggest thing was I don't want your spouse to be upset with me. I
Right.
don't want them to think that I'm trying to step on any toes. I don't want them, to think anything like that. So you tell me, so you talk to them, what are they comfortable with? Let me talk to my spouse, what we're both comfortable with, and then we'll discuss what we're comfortable. So everybody kind of gets part of the conversation.
Yeah, they're
It's
part of that consent process because,
exactly,
you have to be considerate of what they feel on top of what the people actively involved feel, and communication also. Sorry, continue.
exactly. And I took it. I kind of took that same attitude when my spouse and I decided to go into polyamory. We are parallel daters, meaning we don't date people at the same people. Uh, I've got a boyfriend at the moment. My boyfriend and my spouse adore each other. My spouse adores my boyfriend, but I'm also in constant communication with the two of them, and I'm making sure that everybody is on the same platform, same level, and making sure that everybody is on the same page. So communication is key with any RPG game, with any relationship. It's just any sort of interaction you have with another person. And it's always checking in like uh I've read into people who, whether they're RPGs or even people that were dipping their toes into polyamory. It's like, well, they just need to get over it. It's like, no, don't have that attitude. Uh not It's like, okay, say, okay, this is what I like, but you find this, whatever this is, uncomfortable. Let's discuss as far as what is a happy medium. Where is that line? And you have to do that with anybody you meet because my personal line may be completely different than somebody else's.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad that you mentioned that, like, communication, even in TTRPGs, even in a non-romantic setting, is important because, and I love that your book also, and I call it your book because why not? It is. In my mind, it is. I love that they
Thank you.
had an entire section about bleed and,
Hmm.
to be careful of that and how to watch out for that and how to prevent,
Hmm.
you know, that a certain amount might be healthy, but a good majority of it could be problematic.
Hmm.
And I do think that that even comes down to like intense encounters. You might have a shouting match in character, but theoretically, you should be able to walk away from that and say, hey, we're cool, no problem, and be able to go on with your day. But it's not as easy as it seems. And I think a lot of newer players don't know that going in, that like the feelings you're feeling in character can still affect you out of character. And I think that relates to romance too, is like, yeah, you're getting into some deep emotional talk, and while it seems like it's play acting, it can potentially have a real life effect on
Hmm.
you, and to watch out for that and to be mindful of that. And I think that, like you said, communication is key in being preventative about that, and to be very safe and careful about that.
Okay.
um so
Like
I
there
oh yeah, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, I was gonna
No,
say,
no.
like, when it comes to, like, when it's come like, there were a couple of times that I would have to, negotiate scenes ahead of time with people that it was going to be not romantic, but it was gonna be anger, hurt, betrayed, or anything like that. If there's insults being thrown around and all that. So I would have to, there would be times to where it's like, okay, I'm gonna insult you. What are some things that you're okay with that you're not okay with? Like, for example, with me, because of the way my brain works, I don't like it when people call me worthless or stupid or ugly or certain things like that. So there are certain words that I know that are trigger words that are going to upset me, even though I know you don't feel that way.
Right.
But my brain is going to tell me something different. So if we could avoid those and stick with these that I'll be okay with, that's perfectly fine. And I think just understanding where everybody's line is and making sure that you don't even tiptoe it to where you can still have raw emotion. But if you understand that there are just certain lines that you don't cross, it makes the experience a lot more enjoyable to where you can walk away and be like, "Oh, that was a good game. Want to get a beer afterwards?"
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people look at TTRPGs as great therapy, which
Oh
it
yeah.
can be, but I think people have to remember that most people you're playing with are not professional therapists. They don't have the training and tools necessary. So being very, it's a lot of self work. I've found
Right.
the therapy of TTRPG is a lot of self work. Oh, I didn't know this was triggering for me. This is something to be mindful of in the future. Or, oh, I didn't know how into this experience I was going to get. Now I have to be more cautious. It's a lot of, you have to pay attention to yourself and your own behavior and how things affect you, as well as being mindful about how you're affecting the people around you. So while it is a great teaching technique and it is a great learning experience, it's also still can be very dangerous if you're not communicating. So
Oh yeah.
communication in everything is so important.
I will say this, as a perpetual people pleaser, playing RPGs has taught me more about setting boundaries than anything else in my life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And enforcing those boundaries, because you can
Yes,
set them, but it's also your job to make sure that those boundaries stay and that you keep
exactly.
them strong. That's fantastic. So I have some rapid fire questions for you,
Okay.
some little short bits that I want to get into. But before we get into that, I want to remind people of our giveaway. Burnham is giving away a hand stitched hat that, relevant to our current storyline, is Salubri themed. And you could win one of these hats from our wonderful Burnham for free here tonight from watching this stream by putting the hashtag Salubri into the chat. You can get one of these amazing hats shipped to you absolutely free. And we are so grateful to Burnham for offering this up, for being so generous and giving one of these away. So just put the hashtag Salubri into the chat and you will get one of these hats for free shipped to you courtesy of Burnham and St. Pete by Night. Rapid fire question time. One, what's your favorite clan?
Gangrel.
Why?
They were the first ones, and also I just have protein is my favorite discipline of all
Okay.
time. And also my love for dogs and all things furry, I think.
Yeah, we were talking about that earlier that you have two dogs. As an animal lover, it absolutely makes sense. And I found that Protean also has one of the, or more of the more stereotypical vampire powers, the ones we were raised on, the ability to turn into a bat, the ability to, control animals, the ability, all of that is stuff that we associate with vampire mythos going back to the origin of vampire mythos. There was always talk of animals, so that 100% makes sense. What's your least favorite clan?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I have one yet. I guess out of the ones that I have played, I would say with the current one of Are We Dead Yet? Hakata. That was the one that Ruby, my character, Diablerized into. And I realized, wow, this is this is like hard mode.
Yeah. What is a clan that you've always wanted to play but haven't had the opportunity to yet? So, what's one that interests you but you haven't actually gotten to dip your toes in that you'd like to eventually?
I was actually going to be part of the streaming show that was going to be set in Las Vegas, and it was an AR game, and I had this character of Clan Ministry.
Okay.
Uh, Her name was Jezebel, and she was originally from New Orleans, and she owned a strip club in the Luxor Hotel.
Nice.
And I never got a chance to play her, but I would love to play that one in particular, but also I would like to check out Clan Ministry one day.
Ministry has a fantastic, rich lore as well. So, I
Mhm.
definitely recommend taking the opportunity to. Are there any of the other splats or settings, as I think more people refer to it, that you'd be interested in, like werewolf or wraith or changeling, or have you gotten to dabble in any of those other settings or splats before?
The most I got to dabble into was, and some people say, "Oh, why that one?" Was Demon the Fallen. We had a brief one to where it was just like me and a handful of friends were playing like when we could on Discord. And we had this idea for like a fictional city and all that. And I had a great idea for a scourge Ravenger or Ravener.
Okay.
Um, her whole thing was that, hey, I created this beautiful earth and mortals screwed it all up. And now my entire job here on earth is just to mess with the oligarchies and like make billionaires want to unalive themselves. And so that was fun. I do want to would love to be able to play Mage because I've heard so many good things about Mage. Uh, would love to check out Changeling. Um, and I would like to dabble a bit into werewolf, particularly V5 werewolf, to where it uh, cleaned up some things from the
Yes.
previous editions.
Yes,
Uh,
absolutely.
So definitely want to check out some more.
Very cool. Is there any of the splats that you have no interest in? Is there any of them that you're like, yeah, I heard about that. I have no interest in trying it.
Mummy?
Mommy.
Just 'cause
Oh, mommy.
uh,
Yeah, I get
I
it.
just-
There are a few splats, and actually Demon was on that list, but I'm interested to see that you liked it. Uh there were a few of those that I was like, if they don't do a fifth edition of that, I will be perfectly fine with that. Like if we don't see a fifth edition Mummy, if we don't see a fifth edition Demon, I would be totally okay with that because I remember when they first came out, and I remember just it was a lot. It was a lot.
the way I've heard it described is that when it comes to Demon in particular, Demon is a great game. It's just not a very good World of Darkness game.
No. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's trying to shoehorn it into the world of darkness that was problematic, and I think that was one of the issues I had also with Chronicles of Darkness is I'm like, just make a new game. Why
Exactly.
are you trying to sell it off as World of Darkness? It's not. Just make a new game. That being said, did you have any opportunity to dabble with Chronicles of Darkness, and how did you feel it compares to World of Darkness?
No, my first ever and really the only version I've ever played of World of Darkness is V5. So like it confused the heck out of me when I figured out that former editions did not have blood dye.
Right. Yeah, it did not. That was a new thing. That was actually a really cool thing they adapted from Chronicles, which is why I don't regret it entirely as an experience. Even though it did throw away my canon for 10 years, 20 years. Uh, but yeah, it it's one of the cool things that they've adopted from there, yeah.
hmm There was a I just loved what the blood dye did was it just any random thing could turn into something either really good or really bad. In my first game, we had a scene to where like me and the other game girl were sneaking and we ducked because we had a couple of ghouls that were peeking over, and that would have been fine had I not gotten a messy critical and killed
Ex-
those
Except
guys.
for the blood dye. No, they do take that random factor, that chaos factor. They take it up to another notch, and I love that about this
Mhm,
incorporation of the hunger dice as well as the rage dice and the
mhm.
desperation dice for hunter. I love that, and it makes the system more uniform. One of the thing
Oh
about
yeah.
the old splats was that there was no crossplay. It was very difficult to pull off a crossplay game
Mhm.
in the revised edition or any of the older editions. But in the fifth edition, we have learned from experimenting here on St. Pete that it is possible to have hunters and werewolves and vampires all in the same world, which was unheard of before. Or if you tried, it was absolutely ridiculous to try and balance and pull off.
Right.
So I do think that is one of the cool things they've incorporated. Are you currently working on any World of Darkness projects officially? Are you doing any more writing for them? Have you been invited to do anything else?
Not at the present time. I'm in the process of taking a slight break from RPGs
Okay.
in general, focusing on some real life stuff, maybe looking to move up north, uh, get out of the south, things like that. So I'm kind of taking a break. I do know that Huddy would like to look into starting up season 3 of Are We Dead Yet after the summer.
Very cool.
So gonna have a little summer break, and then maybe I'll start dipping my toes back into the RPG scene, particularly when it comes to World of Darkness.
What do you think is the next major splat they're releasing? We know some books coming out. We know Shattered Nation for Werewolf. We know Gehenna War for Vampire. We know they've got some books coming up. But what do you think is going to be the next major splat they release, and why is it probably Mage?
Uh, I was actually thinking Mage just because I have heard so many wonderful things about Mage the Ascension. I know a lot of people who I've known people who are not the biggest fans of World of Darkness, who are not, fans of the style of vampire or werewolf, but they love Mage. They'll play Mage all day long.
Yeah.
Um, and for, and especially like coming when I found out that mages in the World of Darkness are like probably the powerful supernaturals out there.
Oh yeah.
Uh, yeah, definitely. I'm definitely interested to check them out, especially hearing stories on the technocracy and how they would fall into modern day. That would be very interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely. So you said you're taking a break from TTRPGs right now, but you're looking forward to getting back into Are We Dead Yet? Is there any kind of hints or possible lead-ins? Where did you leave off last with Are We Dead Yet, and what can we look forward to potentially in the upcoming version? Do you have any information about that?
Right now, where we left off was just the Are We Dead Yet crew, which is uh half full-fledged vampires, and still we've got a couple of thin bloods, and them just realizing it's like, oh, we have to make a life here in Myrtle Beach. Okay, cool. And just figuring out, especially like for my character Ruby, I had it to where kind of towards the end, Ruby had just kind of somewhat given up. Like she was just like, fuck it, sorry,
No, it's fine. You can, yeah.
this just her whole thing was just like, fuck it, let something attack me. If I die, whatever. I've lost everything. I don't care. And now she's kind of figuring out I still got my friends, and I'm going to protect my friends at all costs. And but now she's got to figure out with her like new Hakata powers, particularly with her Hakata Bane, which is we have it to where everything rots around her.
Oh,
Uh
one of the old school Banes. Okay, yeah.
yeah, so Huddy has it as part of like a homebrew game to where you can choose. And so she was like, "Hey, uh you can either choose painful bite, or you can have everything rot around you." And we were all talking about like the crew was going to uh be owners of a hotel, and that was going to be their domain. And so I was like, "Well, tell you what, since things rotting around me and humans getting sick and all that, that kind of goes for the entire world. Let me see what the other players think about it." And immediately everybody was like, "We can have a goth mansion! Yay! Let everything run around us!" And so that's going to be interesting to see how she deals with just I was like, "Well, can I put her in a basement?" And Huddy was like, "There are no basements in Myrtle Beach." And I was like, "Oh!"
Nope,
And
not in the
also,
flood zones.
no. And also she's gotta figure out how to balance out that obsession with death that the Hakata have. Uh, I have suggested, because one of the characters from Blood on the Grandstand is a veterinarian. I'm like, "Hey, do you need somebody to put down the animals? Because 'Cause I'm pretty sure that'll be perfect for
That'll
Hakata."
work. Yep, that'll work for you guys. So have you ever thought about storytelling? Because it sounds like with Exeter and everything that was involved with that, you kind of got a knack for it, with talking about storylines and working with players in that regard. Have you ever tried, or do you have any interest in ever trying to become a storyteller?
I was doing a little bit of, like, storyteller and training with Exeter. The thing is my anxiety?
No,
I
I get it.
it's a lot, and it's also, like, for me, like, to be a storyteller, like, I try my best to, like, read up on everything but there's so much you have to learn. There's so much you have to know, like, right on the spot. Like, there were times I was a storyteller in training, I'd just be like, and I'm like, uh, and so I think someday, but I think I would first like to try DMing a Dungeons and Dragons game
It's a
first and
great
see
start.
where it
Yeah,
goes from there.
it's a great start. I've found that, I'm a forever DM, forever storyteller. That's just the role I always find myself in. Uh, you're never going to know everything. You
Mhm.
just got to be willing to allow your players to have some input into rulings and stuff like that. Be really embrace the collaborative nature of stuff. But I think learning by doing is the best way to do
Mhm.
it. It's just try it. It might fail, but who cares? Like, just give it a shot, and you pick it up more and more through practice than through study. I've found, but that's fantastic. So before we say goodbye, we're gonna do our giveaway here. For those who have not had the opportunity to enter yet, you can get one of these cool stocking caps made by Burnham himself. But anybody who's been putting the hashtag Salubri into the chat all night long is in the running for that. So if you haven't gotten to, this is your last chance to enter into this giveaway. Just put that hashtag Salubri in the chat and you will be in the running for this hat. So let's do that drawing now. The winner of tonight's free hat from Burnham is Cole Dark. Cole, congratulations. You have won a free hat from Burnham. Fantastic. Enjoy. I'm sure you down in Australia is going to need a wool knit stocking cap more than anyone. Just kidding. But I think you'll love it regardless. It is amazing. And thank you so much to Burnham for giving that as a giveaway. It is a wonderful, wonderful prize. April, thank you so much for joining me tonight talking about your experience. Congratulations on all you've accomplished in just these few 5 or 6 years. It's an amazing feat, an amazing accomplishment. Is there anything you'd like to promote or plug before we say goodbye?
But really be sure to check out Are We Dead Yet on Huddy Von Schland's YouTube channel. She's got tons of playlists that way. And also don't forget that Exeter by Night. Uh, Even though I'm personally taking a break from TTRPGs and LARPs and all that, it is something that is still ran as a once a month live game on Discord. So if you're wanting to scratch that itch for a LARP but don't have anything local to you, this is a great opportunity.
Also, obviously, go follow our beloved April on the Tabletop Geek on all social media. You can find her on TikTok. You can find her on Instagram. Anywhere you can find the Tabletop Geek, you can find April. And yeah, just go give her a follow. As for us, this week we have what's today? Saturday. Tomorrow we have Bloody Strings, their latest episode. Tuesday, we've got the season finale of Rage Across Tampa, our Werewolf the Apocalypse chronicle. So we'll be taking a 1 month hiatus after that. So go check out that last episode. The cairn is being built, but there are obviously some complications in cairn building. So go check that out Tuesday night. Thursday, we've got Don't Get Caught. Friday, we've got What the Hell Is That? Our Hunter the Reckoning Chronicle. And we are going to be taking a hiatus from After Dark for the next month as this guy takes a well deserved vacation for a month. So go check out all of our other programming or go watch our videos on demand that we have on the channel here. Obviously, Hadi von Schland, we talked to a few weeks ago. So if you didn't get a chance to check that out, check that out. We talked to Mr. Gone. We talked to Miss Magitech and Magia RPG. Go check out all those amazing videos on demand on YouTube. We also have the podcast, which is available on all your favorite podcast providers. Just look for St. Petersburg by Night, and you can catch up on episodes if you prefer the audio format to the video format. But I'm Kent at Misha Kent on all social media. Go follow St. Pete by Night on all social media as listed down below in the description. And April, it's been so lovely having you. I can't thank you enough for taking the time tonight. Good night, everyone. Have a lovely evening, and we will see you next time.
This has been a St. Petersburg by Night production. After Dark is produced in agreement with the World of Darkness and Dark Pack. The host for After Dark is Kent. Visit our website at stpetbynight.com for more information about all of our podcasts and how you can become a part of our community. Thank you for listening. Until next time, fangs, stakes, and claws out.